All right, Larry Krueger here at Levi's after training camp practice number 10 with the good and the bad from today's practice. Well, it was a hot day. It was a hot day here in Santa Clara, and it was a hard-hitting practice. It was a long practice. 49ers probably going to have this is probably the hardest practice of the week. My guess is they'll taper it down in difficulty on Tuesday, and then Wednesday they're going to travel, or Tuesday after practice they're going to travel. And then Wednesday they'll be their off day, and then Thursday and Friday they'll play the Raiders in Vegas, and they'll practice with the Raiders, I should say. And then Saturday they'll be off, and of course Sunday they play the Raiders in the preseason. But let's get into the good and the bad from practice today. Why don't we start with the bad? We'll start with the bad. I'll go through some of my notes on some of the bad stuff. One, this was some of the Niners have some great receivers, and they just had a bad day. Just a bad day for the receivers overall. CMC had a perfect fade pass from Purdy on the sideline, and he just missed it. Just didn't turn around in time. Purdy literally put it right on his hands, and he just never saw it. So that was an incompletion. Then Debo dropped a total dime from Purdy as well. Purdy put it right on Debo's hands. He dropped it. Later in the practice, Danny Gray had a drop from Purdy on a little out route. I mean, Brock literally could not have put it any better. Put it right on his hands, and he dropped it. The practice ended with Purdy yelling at Danny Gray, who I think it was just a miscommunication. Brock wanted Danny to keep running his route in the end zone, and I think Danny had stopped running. Brock wound up taking a sack on the play, and you could see Purdy yelling at Danny Gray, and obviously he was not happy. It wasn't the cleanest practice. Colton McKivitz had a false start penalty early in the practice. Trey Lance had kind of a rough practice. He threw an interception to Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, and then Trey almost threw a second interception to A.J. Parker. Parker just dropped it. It was an absolute right to Parker, kind of an interception, and he just dropped it. Darnold's numbers looked pretty good. He was 5 of 9 with a touchdown and a dropped interception, but he also almost threw an interception to Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. It was right there. He just dropped it. Those numbers for Darnold, I mean, he completed 5 of 9, but he just looked unsure of himself a lot today. I did not think that Sam Darnold played well today. Also, there were some injuries. Now, not major ones, luckily, but there were some injuries. Marlon Davidson left practice early. I don't know what the injury was. On a Debo end around, Drake Jackson looked to get up kind of gimpy, and I don't know that he played the rest of practice. And then we saw Juwan Jennings on the sideline getting stretched out by one of the trainers, and it looks like his hamstring either cramped up on him or maybe it's a slight pull, but Jennings definitely had some kind of a hammy issue, and he looked to be in some discomfort towards the end of practice. A couple other things. Lance, as I said, almost had a second interception on a ball that he was throwing to Juwan Jennings that Parker could have picked off. Those were mostly the bad. Darnold looked uncomfortable most of the day throwing the ball. The quarterbacks have been really, really good in this camp for the most part and have completed a high percentage of their passes. But today, Darnold struggled, Lance struggled. Purdy actually looked good despite the fact he was 7 of 16 because he had 3 or 4 drop passes. I mean, very easily could have been 11 of 16 if his receivers didn't let him down. Brock also was 4 of 5 in the red zone, 3 touchdowns. He had the 1 rushing touchdown. And then, as far as on the good side of things, there were a number of good plays today as well. And we can go through those. One was Zane Gonzalez, the kicker, made a 45-yard field goal. He also made a 48-yard field goal. We saw Quantrez Knight come up against the run and really hit, I think it was TDP, really hard. Knight is trying to fight for a roster spot for sure. Tayshaun Gibson is a ball hawk. Tayshaun Gibson, I mean, he is really, if the ball's in the air, Tayshaun Gibson is going to get his hands on it. Sure enough, Greenlaw tipped a pass from Purdy, and Gibson picked it out of the air and then took it back for a touchdown. So that was a terrific play by Gibson. Flanagan Fowles had a great practice too. I mean, he got one interception. He almost had two. Leroy Watson had a beautiful block early in practice down the field, and it was basically an end around to Willie Snead, and you had Watson downfield just making a very, very nice block. I thought in the one-on-one drills, Alex Barrett, Spencer Wagee, and Taco Charlton all looked really good in the one-on-ones. All three of those guys won multiple reps in the one-on-ones. I would say the biggest positive of today's practice was the backup defensive linemen that desperately need to step up, did step up. Austin Bryant really looked good as a pass rusher today. He had a couple of pressures. He may have had at least one sack. It's hard to differentiate between what's a pressure and a sack in practice because they just keep going, So like even after you normally would get a sack, the play continues, and sometimes it's difficult to tell if he got a sack or if it was just a pressure, if he got there ahead of time, or if it was right at the same time the ball was coming out. But he is looking better. Cleveland Farrell had a couple nice plays. Kerry Hyder had a nice sack of Brock Purdy. And then I thought maybe Brock's best play of the afternoon was he got away from the rush, bought himself extra time, stayed behind the line of scrimmage, got to the other side of the formation, and found George Kittle for about a 15-yard pass play. It was the kind of play that we've seen him make many times last year, but it's a difficult play to make. And I thought that was impressive. Just the fact that it looked like it was going to be a broken play. They took away the first read. He buys extra time, gets to the other side of the formation, and then finds Kittle and puts it right on his hands. And he turned it into a real nice gain. Kyle Shanahan said after practice that Brock will practice Thursday and Friday in Las Vegas against the Raiders, but it's very unlikely that Purdy's going to play in that preseason game on Sunday against the Raiders. And then Matt Mayoko asked Shanahan if Purdy needs to play at all in the preseason, and Shanahan seemed to say, yeah, he'd like him to play in the preseason. He thinks everybody needs the preseason, but it doesn't sound like Purdy's going to play at all on Sunday. Couple other notes from today's practice that were interesting. Ty Davis Price continues to look really, really good. The Niners have two backs in Ty Davis Price and Jordan Mason who are both looking really good. Another positive was Jalen Moore returned to practice today, so he's probably the front runner for that third, the swing tackle spot, which is a very important spot on the football team. One more negative: Aaron Banks is still in concussion protocol, so he wasn't out there today. This next one can be good or bad, but it's good for Taco Charlton that he's getting first-team reps. It's bad for the 49ers that a guy who wasn't even on the team 4 days ago is getting first-team reps at defensive end. This is a real concern, I think, because they lost 1,331 snaps last year when they let Willis and Amenahue and Ebukam leave. And they're trying to replace that with quality guys, but man, the guys that are coming in I don't think are as good as the guys that went out. And now Charlton, who's played good, he's played really well the last 2 or 3 practices, but he's getting first team reps at defensive end. He wasn't even on the team 4 days ago. So that tells you how thin they are at defensive end. I think there's a very good chance the 49ers dip into either the free agent market for another defensive end in addition to Nick Bosa, and there's a number of good ones out there: Jadeveon Clowney, Jason Pierre-Paul, Alton Robinson, Melvin Ingram, or possibly the trade market, and watch for, at the cut down, the Dallas Cowboys, because I was looking at Dallas's depth chart. Dallas has about 8 defensive ends, and they're not going to be able to keep them all. I doubt they'll trade any to the 49ers, but there's a couple guys like Junior Fajoko, who played at San Jose State, Tyrus Wheat, who played at Mississippi State, that are down the depth chart for the Cowboys that could wind up being cut at the end of camp. And those guys, I think, are good enough to be picked up here by the 49ers and put on the active roster. So just something to look for. But Austin Bryant did get a couple pressures today. We did see Cleveland Farrell come up with a tackle for a loss against CMC in this practice. And then the other thing that's really noticeable is that the Niners are super deep at linebacker. I mean, every day it's a different linebacker playing really, really well. I mean, the Fred and Dre and Marcelino's playing well, and Winters and Graham and Burks and Robinson, and Flanagan Fowles had the best day today of the linebackers, and it's somebody new every day. And it just means that you probably can only take 6 linebackers on your squad. Just means that they're probably going to be able to trade one of these linebackers before the cut down for some draft pick compensation. So that's something to look for in the weeks ahead. All right, those are the good and the bad from training camp practice number 10. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. And that does it for us on this Monday. Check me out later today. I'll be live streaming with Grant Cohn on both of our channels at 5 o'clock on YouTube. So look for that later today. We'll break down today and, of course, all 10 of the Niners' first practices from down here in warm Santa Clara. All right, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow on The Krug Show.